Hey, so for the second paper here, I wanted to look at a couple things we've gone over. One being game theory, and the other being the effect of oxytocin on people and just kind of how they react. And I wanted to see if I could tie those two together in some way, looking at how in different game theory operations, both on a small scale through experiments and the real world, how oxytocin could possibly have an effect on making the outcome different from what we've experienced or observed in past experiments. So first, I wanted to look at oxytocin, which, if you don't know, is been known as the moral molecule. It's something that we see that increases when oxytocin level increases. You see small increases in charitable giving and trustworthiness and whatnot. And then game theory, which is taking a mathematical and observable approach to how people act in different situations where they have information asymmetries or don't know what the other party is going to do. So in the real world, you'll see this could be like a labor negotiation or people operating in the stock market. But we'll get to that later. So I want to go over a little bit more about oxytocin in depth, which is it's released during a few activities. This can be from getting a hug to being given money, and even while using social media. So because it's linked to things like trustworthiness, morality, and altruism, things like getting money can increase your desire to give charitably or trust someone just overall. And this is a good thing because in the world we've seen that untrustworthiness can lead to less economic transactions and less wealth is created. And we've seen this through studies that have been done where trustworthiness, countries that have higher trustworthy populations often have better economic growth and higher standards of living overall. There is one double-edged sword almost with higher levels of oxytocin, though, is that 5% of the population doesn't produce oxytocin in normal situations, and this can lead to some people not being as moral as they should be and can almost prey on other people's morality. This can be likened to a con man, something like that, preying on someone's trust and being able to deceive them and take money from them. So the first example I wanted to look at of game theory was guessing two-thirds of the average along with a bunch of other people. So the idea here is that you're guessing from 0 to 100 what two-thirds of the average of everyone else's responses will be. So normally some people would think, or what we noticed was that it would either be 0, 22, or 33 were the most common answers. 33 stems from the fact that it's two-thirds of 50, which a lot of people would assume would be the average of people guessing numbers 0 to 100. But then some people took it a step further and noticed that 22 is two-thirds of 33, which is two-thirds of 50. And then a bunch of people realized that maybe, or that eventually you would just get down to 0 if you kept using that logic to get all the way back down. So this shows people's desire to try and think a step ahead of someone or outsmart them in a way. And one way that people try to do that in the world now is the stock market, guessing when's the right time to get in and out, when are the peaks. So by doing that, they're not necessarily thinking rationally, and they're, I guess, trying to not looking at valuation or anything like that, and they're just kind of going with game theory and trying to guess when the peak is. And another thing that comes along that is people take advantage during these peak times. When these peak times are happening, it's often easier to sell things, whether it be like in the 2008 housing bubble, you were able to sell houses very easily, get very good lines of credit when you shouldn't be, and also the stocks were going higher than they should have at the same time. And then you see the same thing in the 2000 bubble where anything with a dot-com was able to sell regardless of valuation because they were taking advantage of people's ability to try and guess and ride the way up without having to deal with the eventual crash of markets when they get overvalued. So one thing that kind of relates to morality and altruism here is people, instead of trying to take advantage of others and sell during these high markets, is if they had this more morality based on the oxytocin being produced in their brain, they'd be more likely to be a better fiduciary for their clients or anything like that. So that one kind of relates. The second one I think relates a lot more. So this game theory was actually just two participants. You were given, participant A was given some type of money, either $1 to $6, and they have the ability to give some of that to participant B. And if participant B accepts however much they give them, they get the remaining that they were given. So player 2 can either reject or accept this offer and send it back to player 1 with a counteroffer. The problem here is player 2 doesn't know how much player A was given or player 1 was given. So a $1 offer if player 1 only has $2 is technically more charitable or giving than if player A has $6 and only gives player B $2. So it's about how much they trust the person if they're giving them a fair deal. And this can be resembled to labor negotiations where one side doesn't have all the information as the other side, creating an information asymmetry of how much the company would be willing to pay the union or the person versus how much the union or the person would be willing to work for and what benefits and whatnot gets worked in there. So this can take a long time. And if oxytocin levels were increased on both sides, increased charity, so not being greedy and taking too much, and also trustworthiness the other side is going to give them a fair shake, could greatly reduce the, the time and effort that's put into these long labor negotiations, which in the end would be better overall. You're spending less money, and I guess just wealth is not being lost to pointless labor negotiations that end up in the middle in almost every case as well. You end up there quicker, save money and time. So obviously, when you're looking at these, it was very interesting to see how we act being tied to an actual molecule we find in our brain. But the problem is, how do we work this into the real world? We know that there's some ways to increase oxytocin from, like we talked about, getting a hug or getting money, or even using social media. It can also be administered pharmaceutical-wise, so putting it into someone's body personally, but then it only lasts a couple minutes, and it's not as replicable, and it's not as, I guess, morally at that standard to just pump drugs into someone's body to try and get a better result out of something. And there's also the double-edged sword. So people could also use this as a way to con people. Giving them oxytocin makes them more trustworthy and more likely to give them something. So it was very interesting to kind of look into this and see where oxytocin possibly could be used in the future. But as for right now, it looks like just something we have to study and see kind of how it can help us be a better, society overall and create more wealth. So it's interesting.